Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm recording this video last night for those of you who are watching it this morning. My asthma doctor has told me that I need to save my voice and I need to make getting healthy a top priority. So I have decided to save my voice by recording a video for you of the lecture for today's class. It's not going to be a very long video because we have peer review today in class, but I do want to give you some of the essentials of the Nietzsche reading that we read for today, and also to briefly summarize some points from last time. I am absolutely determined to make it through the Nietzsche reading for today, and I'm very much looking forward to giving this lecture to you. With that said, let's briefly recall last time our discussion of Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche is a German philosopher who lived from 1844 to 1900. He is famous for his atheism, and he's famous also for his very stark and I think honest discussion of what life is like in the absence of God, what we can expect in this world in the absence of God, what we can hope for in this world in the absence of God. And Nietzsche is, I suggested last time, perhaps the most influential of the philosophers of modernity. Certainly his thought, at least in modified form, has been spread far and wide throughout Western culture today. And for that reason, I think that we need to take his ideas very seriously. And at the very least, I think that we should be charitable interpreters of Nietzsche and try to understand him on his own terms so that we can get inside his worldview, get inside his mindset, and acknowledge and understand the reasons why he said the things that he did. Nietzsche is a brilliant thinker, and he deserves to be taken seriously. With that, recall last time that we discussed Socrates and the problem of Socrates. In particular, there are two problems with Socrates. One is, of course, that Socrates employed reason. Socrates is famous for using the dialectical method to discuss with his interlocutors in dialogues like the Phaedo and the Euthyphro and the Meno. And he discusses with his interlocutors important issues in philosophy about the immortality of the soul and the nature of knowledge. But Socrates uses reason throughout these dialogues in a way that he thinks, at least he says, is objective and will help us arrive at truth. Now, Nietzsche thinks that this is a problem, and the problem in particular is that Socrates is employing reason to mask his own will to power. Socrates is deceptively trying to dupe the interlocutors that he is interacting with, and ultimately to dupe the tradition. Socrates in particular is teaching his interlocutors, or trying to get them to think that there is such a thing as truth. He is trying to get them to think that it is possible by use of reason to arrive at truth. And just to hammer these ideas home, I want briefly to read a couple of passages from The Twilight of the Idols, just so that we can see some of these ideas in motion. Nietzsche writes on page 43, if you're following along, Socrates understood that all the world had need of him, his expedient, his cure, his personal art of self-preservation. Everywhere the instincts were in anarchy. Everywhere people were but 5 steps from excess. The instincts want to play the tyrant, Socrates said. We must devise a counter-tyrant who is stronger. So I take it that what Nietzsche means here is that Socrates went around asserting that human beings have instinctual passions and that reason can be used to control these passions, that argumentation can be used to corral these passions. And Socrates, so Nietzsche is arguing, made of reason a tyrant to try to disguise his own will to power. Further down on page 43, Nietzsche writes, if one needs to make a tyrant of reason, as Socrates did, then there must exist no little danger of something else playing the tyrant. And then finally on page 44, Socrates purported to offer the people around him a remedy. He purported to offer them reason as a remedy for the chaos and the uncertainty of their lives. Nietzsche writes at the top of page 44, I have intimated the way in which Socrates exercised fascination. He seemed to be a physician, a savior. Is it necessary to go on to point out the error which lay in his faith in rationality at any cost? And yet Socrates, in fact, according to Nietzsche, in spite of his seeming offering of medicine through reason, really offered poison. Really what Socrates is offering in the form of reason was something that made people sick. It caused them to fall prey or fall subject to the Socratic deception, the deception of dialectic. I mentioned the second problem with Socrates last time, and that's the two worlds view, or the two worlds hypothesis. Nietzsche thinks that Socrates, in positing the existence of the realm of the forms, or Plato using Socrates as a mouthpiece, in positing the existence of the realm of the forms, is setting human beings up to think throughout their lives that this world is of only minimal importance in comparison to another world, which is more real than this world, more important than this world, more lasting than this world. And Nietzsche says that that's a problem. The problem in particular is that it causes people to live their lives believing something else than this world to be more important. And you can see very, very clearly that this is a theme in Christianity as well. So I'm a Christian. I live my life believing actually that what I do here is, at least temporally, insignificant in comparison to the afterlife of eternity. And that belief, according to Nietzsche, causes a lot of persons to live wretched lives, lives of misery, lives where they forego pleasures, lives where they live contrary to their instincts. And because of this, he thinks that the two worlds hypothesis, which Socrates posited and which he thinks that Christians also endorsed and have endorsed down through the centuries, the two worlds hypothesis is deeply, deeply problematic. It damages the flourishing of persons. Now, that's a review from last time. A quote briefly to cement this. Look at the bottom of page 44. Nietzsche writes, Socrates wanted to die. It was not Athens, it was he who handed himself the poison cup, who compelled Athens to hand him the poison cup. Socrates is no physician, he said softly to himself. Death alone is a physician here. Socrates himself has only been a long time sick. So what Nietzsche is writing there is that Socrates, in fact, considers life to be bad, a bad thing, which must be avoided or must be in some way abstracted from. In this sense, then, Socrates, according to Nietzsche at least, is teaching a morality and a view of the world that is very anti-life. It is life-denying. And in contrast to that, as we're going to discuss in the balance of today's lecture, Nietzsche himself advocates a morality that is life-affirming, a morality that embraces this world. Okay? So let's look briefly at some ideas in today's lesson. I hope that you enjoyed the reading for today. It's not difficult reading. It's really more aphoristic kind of reading. It's rhetorical, to be sure, but also it's very interesting. Nietzsche is a well-known stylist, and I actually find some of his illustrations quite compelling and interesting. And that's part of the reason why I think that we should take him seriously. I want to start today's discussion by looking at an important passage. And this is on page 66 in the book. Nietzsche writes near the bottom of the page, "In all ages, one has wanted to improve men. This, above all, is what morality has meant. Both the taming of the beast man and the breeding of a certain species of man has been called improvement. Only these zoological termini express realities, realities to be sure of which the typical improver, the priest, knows nothing, wants to know nothing." Nietzsche continues, "To call the taming of an animal its improvement is almost a joke. Whoever knows what goes on in zoos is doubtful whether the beasts in them are improved. They are weakened, they are made less harmful, they become sickly beasts through the depressive emotion of fear, through pain, through injuries, through hunger. It is no different with the tamed human being whom the priest has improved." And I want to pause here at this passage and reflect for a minute on this compelling illustration. What Nietzsche is arguing is that the received morality that you and I have received from our ancestors through Socrates, to be sure, but also through the Judeo-Christian tradition, is morality that basically acts upon us like zoos act upon animals. So if you go to the Houston Zoo in Herman Park, my wife and I love going to the Houston Zoo. We go there frequently. We especially like the African Savannah exhibit. But if you go to the zoo in Herman Park and you observe the animals, what do they do all day? They sleep. They basically lie around waiting to be fed. They don't behave as they naturally do on the savannah or in their African habitat or in their South American habitat, in their Asian habitat, whatever it is. They basically act as though they are tamed and they become shadows of their former selves. In the context of the zoo, their instincts become corralled and they become pathetic. In a lot of ways, they become feeble nothings in comparison to what they once were or what their counterparts are out in the wild. And that's what Nietzsche says the received morality is like. It is a morality which has made us pathetic. It has made us feeble. It's made us instinctual. It's made us captives whose instincts have been corralled. And it's not hard to see why he would say this. Think for a second about some of the values that are privileged in a famous Christian moral teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. So what kinds of values are privileged in the Sermon on the Mount? Definitely values like humility, meekness, love, kindness, gentleness. Okay, or you could think of the fruits of the Spirit. Those that many of us memorized in Sunday school: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and so forth. Right? These kinds of values seem to have a taming effect on us, is what Nietzsche is arguing. These kinds of values actually cause us to become diminished selves. So if I take it, if I'm being gentle, I'm not acting in accordance with my passion. If I'm trying to love someone, I'm not stirred up in a way that is dynamic and perhaps even hostile, and dynamic because it's hostile. The kinds of values that are taught to us by the Judeo-Christian tradition, then, according to Nietzsche, are in fact values that have diminished us as human beings. They've enfeebled us. Think in contrast to these values to some of the values that existed prior to the Judeo-Christian tradition. Some of the values that existed especially prominently in the Mediterranean basin, in Greco-Roman culture. So we've all seen, or many of us have seen at least, the movie Gladiator. Pardon me. Russell Crowe runs around in Gladiator, and what does he do? He thumps his chest, he throws spears and wields his sword. He's a powerful man who lives a courageous life, a heroic life. And that's the kind of that set of warrior values is the kind of value set